All right, I want to show you something that might surprise you. Take a look at this footage. This is China, a world where digital CCTV cameras have the brains to match it. Across China, there's a network of 176 million surveillance cameras that keeps watch on over 1.3 billion citizens. It's loaded with facial recognition technology and artificial intelligence that keeps tabs on people and their activities. This week, a technology company based in San Francisco and Montreal launched a similar technology called AICam. Kogniz offers businesses the ability to keep an eye on people, their movements, and the opportunity to assess threats in real time. It uses artificial intelligence, facial recognition, and object detection technology, along with advanced cloud services. The products are currently in pilot programs with law enforcement, government agencies, banks, and corporations. So how long before that Chinese imagery we just saw becomes a reality here in Canada? For that, I want to bring in Daniel Putterman, the co-CEO and head of business at Kogniz. He joins me from Las Vegas. Great to see you. How does this technology work?
Well, we've really had some major breakthroughs in both the software side and the hardware side over the last year. I mean, on the software side, we're using convolutional neural networks, a form of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And actually, the main reason we're able to do it on the hardware side is because of all the innovations around drones and self-driving cars. We've been able to take that massive power in a small form factor and actually fit it inside of a standalone camera.
I mean, there is such a conversation, and I think rightly and importantly, about our data and about how we disseminate that data and what corporations, what governments know about us. How does this fit into that larger puzzle of this conversation of a society coming to terms with how much corporations and how much governments know about us? This will only sort of feed into that, won't it?
Well, listen, I think it's a fair question, but what we're doing at our company is we're really democratizing the technology. So we're not just installing in massive government locations around, for example, a whole city or a whole large area necessarily. We're allowing individual companies, individual organizations to buy as few as one camera. And facial recognition is coming. I mean, whether we're ready for it or not, it's coming. The question, I believe, is what we do with it. And there are many positive use cases of facial recognition, ranging from, of course, finding a blacklisted person, maybe someone that we'd like to see in advance before they get on premise or on property. But it can also be used for whitelist purposes, allowing people to get into office buildings faster, allowing VIPs and lobbies to be welcomed more quickly, and to generally just be more proactive around what today is a very passive style technology called surveillance that requires massive manpower if we think about it. So I think, there is a responsibility around facial recognition, but I don't think we necessarily have to always think of it as being Big Brother.
You say facial recognition is coming. Is it not already here? I mean, the BBC did that great piece with John Sudworth where he was in China. He went to a city, I can't remember what it was called, of like 3.5 million people and tried to get lost. He just sort of lost himself in the crowd. And using that facial recognition, they found him in like 7 minutes. It was incredible.
Yes.
Is the technology there? Does it exist now?
The technology does exist. I mean, we're one of the companies deploying it. I think it's the method of deployment that's getting really exciting, where before the installation that you're referring to, for example, in China and other locations, we know of one, of course, in Russia, in Moscow, this requires massive behind-the-scenes infrastructure. And I think where the technology is getting very exciting is by allowing it to exist in small form factor, the style of deployment, it becomes much more flexible. I mean, we're going to see this technology in cars. We're going to see it on backpacks. We're going to see it, of course, in corporate lobbies. So I think how we roll it out is going to become a lot more, as I mentioned, democratized and flexible by individuals.
I have concerns about this as a layman, and I read it and I see it. You work in this industry. You're developing this technology. You know it better than pretty much anybody I've ever spoken with. What is it about this that keeps you up at night? Where do you see your concerns about how this is developed and deployed?
Well, I can tell you for us, since day one when we started developing the project, we at exactly the same time began working on a project that we call the Racial Unbiasing Project. So we all know there's enough racial discrimination around the world to go around. And the last thing we'd like to see is facial recognition contributing to that. Most of the models in deployment today, at least in our nation, are based on publicly available photos and videos that typically come from politicians and movie stars. So we get a lot of white middle-aged men that train the model. And what we've done is we've taken this very, very seriously, because the last thing we want is the solution to be biased, which many of the solutions are. And we've actually, through machine learning, let the machine tell us how many different cultures or races it believes there are. And the machine has actually narrowed it down to 12 very distinct facial structures across races and profiles. And using something that we call facial routing, we're actually able to take an individual, map them into a model, and keep the precision very high. I do think that with this type of technology, there is responsibility around it. There's the obvious one around data security and leakage, but there's also the concept of being racially biased or misidentifying someone because of that computer vision modeling.
Well, and that misidentification bit is an important one. What is the failure rate? Do you guys have data on that?
Well, it's interesting. You know, the mathematics, and of course, this is always in theory, the mathematics say that we're near 100%. So the number is something along the lines of 99.983%. And that's obviously compounded by a number of factors. One of them could be lighting. It could be the position of your face. And again, it could be this notion of the model that describes, the computer model that describes who you look like, basically, and therefore how you're recognized. So, you know, on paper, it's highly, highly accurate, and there are knobs to adjust it up or down depending upon your application. But I do believe that it's a constant refinement to increase the accuracy. I mean, we've come such a long ways. I mean, the fact that I can drop in, for example, a photo of you over the web and recognize you with near 100% accuracy, it is amazing. But I think we're going to continue to improve it, and also really focus in on use cases that don't misuse error factors or error rates accordingly.
A fascinating conversation, Daniel. Thank you for making the time today. Daniel Putterman, the co-CEO and head of business at Kogniz.